Staying Alive, Rocky Four, Transformers, the movie. This singer, songwriter, keyboards, synthesizer, piano, drums. It is our pleasure, my pleasure, to introduce Mr. Vince Dicola. Are we on a lag?
There we are.
There we
Yeah, I
go.
think so. A little lag there. Sorry. I think it's a little West Coast delay there or something.
I,
Yeah.
I was just
Hey,
thanking
Vince,
you
thanks
for
for
having me
joining
on the
us.
show.
Oh, thank you for joining us. Oh my God.
And
Thank you.
hello to all the fans.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay,
So we're dealing with a little bit of a
So
lag
amazing.
here.
Yeah,
I hear that.
So everybody, please bear with us on this
yeah.
one. We got
It'll catch up.
yeah. So Tony, go
It'll
ahead.
catch up. There we go.
Go
So
ahead, Tony.
obviously, those of you that know Vince's work from Rocky Four, quite a few songs on there from Rocky Four. So Vince, I don't know if you want to go into a little just detail of how you got selected, I guess, or how you wound up doing the score for Rocky Four.
It's a good story, and I'll preface it by saying there was no reason in the world I should have gotten that job because all the composers in Hollywood were vying for it. Songwriters, producers. It's unbelievable. My manager just happened to be the music supervisor on the film, and he said, "Listen, I was one of the first people that heard that Sylvester Stallone had a fallout with Bill Conti. I don't know what that was about." And Robin said, "Look, I know it's a long shot." Robin Garb is my former manager. He said, "I know it's a long shot, but I would like to pitch you for scoring Rocky Four." Well, after I laughed for about 5 minutes, I said, "Robin, I can't even imagine." He said, "We have nothing to lose." He said, "Here's my campaign. Here's my suggestion. I have the script. I know exactly what the movie's
Sure.
going to be. Um, I just want you to write 5 pieces of music. I want you to write a training scene, a fight scene, some funeral music because of the main character, one of the main characters dying, and two what he called tender piano strings for Rocky and Adrian."
Oh, okay.
So I had no picture to look to. This was a long shot, and I was in a one-bedroom apartment at the time. I had a little, very little studio, a little, I think it was a Fostex 8-track, and I just, I thought I was laughing, and I said, this is good because I don't have anybody looking over my shoulder, so I can treat this as an experiment. I don't care if I mean, of course I do care, but I don't want that to be the driving force. I want to know. I mean, I used it to see what would Vince Dicola do for any Rocky movie. So I had that in mind. And first piece that I wrote was Training Montage. And over the course of the next couple, no, more than a couple months, over the next year, I teamed up with a good friend of mine in Lake Charles, Louisiana, named Ed Fruget, and he has a studio. And I flew over there, and luckily he had ties to the local university, so we had access to the orchestra from the university. So we really had a lot of cool elements to put a good demo together, and we did. Um, and it sounded great. And in fact, the version that is on the soundtrack album is actually the demo.
Really?
That's how good
Oh
it
wow.
sounds.
It's amazing.
Of course, there's another version for the movie, which I always get clobbered for. I don't know why people clobber me for that. Why did you change? That's another story. That's another subject. Um, so we recorded Rocky. I'm sorry, Training Montage and War, the fight scene, and I did a little funeral thing in my studio and a little piano strings thing, two piano string cues in my studio. So all is done, ready to go. So Robin said he heard the demo. He said, "This is phenomenal. I can't guarantee you anything." I said, "Yeah, I know." So the way he told me the story was he found a moment when Sly was in his trailer on the set, and he was alone. And Robin had a little Walkman cassette. I don't know if you remember those.
Oh yeah.
And I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
And a pair of headphones. And
Oh,
he
yeah.
said that he stuck the headphones on Sly's head. He says, "I want you to listen to something." And Sly said, "Well, who am I listening to?" He says, "I'm not going to tell you. I just want you to hear what's on this cassette tape." And the first song he played was Training Montage. And the way Robin told me the story, within 15 seconds, Sly apparently uh, jumped out of the chair and he said, "Who the F is this?"
That's so
And
cool.
Robin said, "This is Vince Dicola." He said, "Vinny, the guy that wrote with your brother on Staying Alive?" And Robin says, "Yes." He said, "Sign him up." So now what I thought was never going to happen is happening, and I'm scared to death because now I have to, deliver.
Yeah.
But the good thing about it is most of the music was already um, it was already okayed by Sly. He heard it and he said, "We'll just adapt it to the picture. But as far as themes, you got them." So at least I had that part out of the way, and I just selected our musicians, Ed and I, and we produced it, and we were very happy with the outcome.
That's amazing. Did you had like the chance to read the script? Well, I'm kind of wondering, like, as you're sitting there and and I'm not a musician by no stretch of the imagination, but um, how does that inspiration come to you? You're sitting there and you're like, okay, you gotta do a training montage. I can't even imagine where you would begin with the movements and the sounds, and to make it so as invigorating as it is. I mean, how does that all come into play? That's crazy to me.
Well, it's crazy to me too. Um, I had the benefit of having Rocky movies in my mind, and I
Okay.
three
Well, there
Rocky,
you go.
right?
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
My favorite is the first one, but I had Bill Conti's music in mind, and I knew that I had to incorporate some of his elements into my music, and I
Hmm.
was fine with that, of course. But I'll tell you what I had in mind when I wrote this music. I have influences from all over the place. My main influence is Keith Emerson of Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
I did see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Another one is Toto. I love Toto. I love how they used keyboards in their songs.
Yeah.
And it was just at the time when Phil Collins came out with In the Air Tonight, and
In
it's
the air tonight.
huge drums. And I said to my fellow musicians and my co-producer, what this cannot be an orchestra with a rock band in the background. I want this to be rock in
Mhm.
the keys, the drums, the guitar out front, and I want the orchestra to support that. Luckily, when I got an
Mhm.
orchestrator, James, uh, what's his first name? Lubbock, Jeremy Lubbock. He's
Oh yeah.
worked with David Foster. He's worked with a bunch of
Oh yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah. I recognize that name.
And as soon as he came in, he got it. He said, "Vince, this is what I want to do." He said, "I've orchestrated this in such a way that your stuff is going to be the focal point. I'm just going to support it. The orchestra's just going to support
Awesome.
it." So yeah, I threw those influences into the pot, stirred it around a little bit. I had Rocky's, three Rocky movies in mind, and that was the inspiration.
So do you just like sit at your I'm just gonna say keyboard just for the lack of not knowing, but do you sit at your keyboard and all of a sudden you just start like you just have I don't like a sound or a theme or something in your mind and it just transfers from
Like
your
a
mind to
tempo
your
or
fingers?
something.
Yeah, like yeah, exactly, Tony. Like yeah.
Um,
Where's the for me it's the disconnect between the brain and the fingers. For you, it's like it's all one big thing. So
uh,
yeah, that's amazing. I mean, does it just flow right through? I mean, I can't
well,
even.
no, it doesn't do that often. Very rarely. I had a piano, electric piano, in my apartment, and the way I write, excuse me, hey Beth, sorry.
That's okay.
No
The way I
worries.
write is I just put the tape recorder in record, and I just start playing. I start playing in the style that I love,
Hmm.
and again with those influences in mind. I don't remember how fast. I do kind of remember that Training Montage, which was the most exciting one for me to attack. It came pretty quickly. I didn't
Yeah.
have melody before Robin wanted to pitch me for the movie. I didn't have the melody, but as soon as he told me about the campaign he wants to put together, Training Montage was the first piece I wanted to attack, and I seem to remember that came to me pretty quickly.
That's amazing. That is so cool. Are we still on a delay tone?
Without seeing any scene from the film, right? You didn't do any film, Rocky 4 film
Nope,
watching.
nope, nope.
You
And
didn't
that
have any
was
preview to scenes.
no. All I had was Robin telling me the script. He wouldn't even give me the script. He said, "Here's what's going to happen," and it's going to be there's going to be elements that are shared with the other Rocky movies. There's going to be a training scene and all that stuff. So he said, just use that as a reference and do what you would do with your style and your influences and come up with these 5 pieces of music. And that's what I did.
Wow.
Right.
Now, um, Tony told me this just prior to going on, and I did not know this. But one of my most favorite songs is Hearts on Fire. And he
Oh,
told me that you wrote that.
I did. I
That
wrote the
I
music.
mean, that is like one of my most favorite songs, of, not just of Rocky, but in general.
Wow. That's
And I absolutely love that. In whenever I have the opportunity to work out or train, that comes on. Man, I run right over my speed bag.
wow. Wow.
That is my ultimate. I absolutely love that song.
Well, thank you. I wrote the music. I did not write the words. Those were written by Ed Frugier, my co-producer, and a gentleman I'm sure you were aware of, well, maybe Joe Esposito. I
Yeah.
don't know what that name is. So Joe and Ed wrote the lyrics, and I wrote the
Mm-hmm.
music.
Yeah.
I gave the
Karate
music to
Kid.
them. They wrote the words.
And John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band.
A funny story too. Joe sang on the demo, and Joe sang unbelievably well. And actually, later, Sylvester Stallone came to Joe and said, "I'm sorry that I couldn't use your version, but the record company, Scotty Brothers Records, had their artists ready to go, and we thought of all the artists, John Cafferty would be the guy." So I said, "Yeah, we could make that work." And I remember the first day that John came in the studio, and he said he didn't know who I was. He just walked past me. He said, "I don't know who the F wrote this song, but I don't know that it's really right for me."
What?
And I tapped him on the shoulder. I said, "I wrote the song, and I think it's good for you, great for you." And he did a great job. He came in. I remember he did it quickly, and that was it.
It kind of sounds like Carl Weathers reading in front of Stallone, saying,
I,
"Well, if I was in front of a real
Yeah.
actor."
Right.
I don't know. I never heard that story.
What's that?
I never heard that story.
Oh, you never heard
Yeah.
that story?
Short story. Supposedly, when Carl Weathers, yeah,
Yeah.
he read for the Apollo part, and he was reading with Sly. Supposedly, he said to Sly that if I could read with a real actor, maybe I'd do better. So he didn't realize Sly was playing Rocky.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Sly
did you?
said that's the arrogance Apollo needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have the
Too
opportunity?
funny.
You had the opportunity to work with Sly on Saturday Night Live. Did you?
That was Staying Alive,
Staying Alive. I'm sorry.
the
My
sequel to
bad.
Saturday Night Fever.
Yeah.
And I really didn't even interact with him. It was mostly
Okay.
Frank, his brother.
Okay.
That's a great story if you want to hear it, but it's kind of
Yes.
long.
No.
Absolutely.
I love telling the story. I've told it hundreds of times now, and I enjoy telling it. So
Absolutely.
Frank comes to me. Frank was also managed by Robin at the time, and Robin said, "I want to get you and Frank together." So I met Frank. Actually, I'm sorry. Let me backtrack. I was playing in a cover band at the time in one of these clubs. There's a chain of clubs. I can't remember the name of it. And it was an off night. I do remember that. And sitting up on the stage, and kind of on what do you call that when you can cruise control? With
Oh,
I was just playing, and I knew the music. And sometimes when it's not there's not a lot of people there, you kind of just go, okay, let's get through this. But I saw a guy come in from the door, and he came in and sat down right in front of the keyboards. And I thought, this guy really looks familiar. And at a break, Frank came up to me and he said, I want to introduce myself. I'm Frank Stallone. And I said, that's why you look familiar to me. You look like your brother. And we, Frank and I started, I love this part of my career, really. We started playing in clubs around LA, the two of us, a duo. Frank on guitar and singing, me on keyboards, harmonizing with him.
oh my God.
And, the clubs or the places that we played were not that big or prestigious, but this was my first experience since moving out to LA in 1981.
Was this prior to his Valentine days?
No, it was after that.
After that, okay, okay.
So I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. It happens like 5 times a minute.
Me too.
So Frank came up and introduced himself. Oh, okay. We were playing these clubs. This was the first time I was able to sit in a club and play for an audience that wasn't just interested in dancing. And that was great for me. I loved that so much. And I loved our little duo. We sounded great. And that, we had, I don't remember how many gigs we did, but we did quite a few in the LA area. And then Frank decided, let's stretch this out to a band. Let's pull in a drummer, a guitar player, and a bass player. I said, great. So between the two of us and people we knew, we got a band together. And one day we were on the set, on the lot of, it was an MGM lot in Culver City, California. And Sly had gotten Frank one of the sound stages to rehearse in. It was a small one, but it was really cool because we got to get on the lot every day for rehearsal. So during one of our rehearsals, and I didn't know he was going to show up, even Frank didn't know, here comes Sly with his entourage. And we stopped rehearsing, of course, and Frank introduced us all. It was great. It was great, really, for me. I mean, it was a big moment. I just loved Rocky, the first Rocky movie. And at that time, this was 1982, so he was just huge.
Yeah,
it was an honor. It was an honor, of course. So Frank and Sly, during our break, went off into a corner, and they had someone talking, and then Sly said goodbye to all of us, and he left. He was only there for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. After the rehearsal was over, Frank said, "Can you stick around for a little bit?" I said, "Sure." He said, what my brother was telling me was that he was just signed on to write and direct the sequel to Saturday Night Fever. I said, "Wow, that's fantastic." He said, "Yeah, it is." He said, "Keep in mind," well, let me backtrack a little bit. He said, "My brother told me, keep in mind there's going to be everybody and his grandmother vying for position to get a song in Rocky IV. So, and I can't show any favoritism. That's just not done. That's not right." So he said, if you want to write a song, I can guarantee you one thing: it will be listened to. It's going to be listened to by a committee. It's not all up to me, and we will give you our honest opinion. So Frank and I and the band go into a studio. It was my first opportunity to go in a professional recording studio since moving to LA. And it was such fun. I think we did this over 2 days. We did. I got to backtrack again. I went up to Frank's house in Bel Air, and we wrote a couple songs. And Joe Esposito came in because Frank knew Joe. I did not at the time. So long story short, Frank and I ended up writing 5 songs together, 3 of which were co-written with Joe Esposito. And it was just grand piano that Sly had at his house, Frank on guitar and singing a couple melodies here and there. We put together 5 songs, and then he said, "Let's go into the studio to record them." We did. I think it was over a period of 2 days. And okay, so now it's time to take the master tape over to his brother. So Frank, I didn't know what to expect. Frank called me that night. He said, "I'm afraid I don't have good news." I said, "Why?" He said, "My brother not only felt these weren't right for the movie, he hated these songs. Hated them." I said,
Oh my
"Really?" He said, "I was right beside him when he was listening, and he just looked over at me. He said, 'I hate these songs. I'm sorry, Frank, but I do not like these songs.'" I said, "Oh, wow." Well, and that, to me, that was the end of the story. But in my mind, it was the end of the
Sure.
story. But a day or two later, Frank comes over. He said, or he calls me and he said, I want to take one more shot at this. And I said, "Frank, why? We're 0 for 5 here." He says, "I know," but he said, "Let's take an afternoon. If you don't have anything better to do, let's take an afternoon and write a song, just you and me." I said, "Okay." And he was right. I had nothing better to do. I was only working at night with club bands at that time. So my
Right.
afternoons were open. Frank came over and he had a boom box. I remember a little cassette boom box. He said, "This is what I record ideas on." I said, "Cool." So he said, "This is what I think my brother's looking for." He says, "I don't have a musical idea, but I think I have the concept that he wants. And if I'm right, no one else that's handing him material is handing him this type of song." I said, "Okay, what do you have in mind?" He said, "Up tempo, rock, melodic, with theatrical elements." And he even had a tempo in mind. He was clicking to me like this. He said, "That's right in that tempo." I said, "Well, okay." He said, "Just start playing. Just start playing on the piano, and I'll tell you that's good if
Oh
we
my
arrive
God.
at a good idea." And that's
I
what
can't
we
even
did.
imagine that.
30 minutes later, we had the skeleton to Far From Over, which was ended up being the big hit of the movie. Actually, almost the theme, I would say, even over the Bee Gees material.
Mm.
So I said, "Okay, let's go into the studio and record this. I really like this idea, Frank." And I think he only had one melody, and that was the hook line on the chorus. Everything else we hadn't gotten together yet. So we finished writing the song as best as we could. We went in. We didn't go into the studio. That was my problem. Frank said, "I'm going to take this tape from the little boombox over to my brother," and I begged Frank not to do that. I said, "We did 5 songs in a big studio before, and we didn't get anything from your brother." I said, "I'm really, really
Right.
hesitant about
Right.
this." Frank said, "I have a gut feeling." I don't know if Frank told you this story, but he says, "I have a gut feeling about this
No.
song." So that night, I went out to dinner with my wife because I really needed to distract myself. I didn't want to get my hopes up because of what the history of happened up to that point on this project. So I tried to distract myself. We come back. We had been living in a house at the time with 2 other couples to save money.
Mm.
And the other 2 guys were musicians and we knew them. So that was kind of cool. But we had this 1 bedroom in this 3-bedroom house. And we walked in that night after dinner and we had a little AT&T white answering machine there with a light that blinks when there's a
Oh
message.
yeah.
And we noticed that there was a light blinking. And I looked at Beth, my wife. I said, "I don't want to even hear what's on there. I'm afraid to hear what's on there." Well,
Sure.
because we're from back east, she said, "It might be an emergency that somebody's trying to get us from our family or something." I
Right.
said, "Okay." So she actually went over to the machine and pressed play. And the voice said, "Home run, Vinny. I can't wait to hear the song when it's done." And it was Sylvester Stallone.
Oh my
Oh,
God.
jeez.
And he didn't have to do that. I'm sure Frank suggested it to him, but he could have said, "No, I'm not going to do that." Sorry, I'm turning this phone off.
That's fine.
You hear that? That's how my
Yeah.
are announced. Um, he said, I lost train of thought again. By the
Home
way,
run.
I had, yeah, okay. I had COVID when it first came up, and I still have the short-term memory problem.
Mm.
Oh,
That's one of
geez.
the effects, and that was
Yeah.
4 or 5 years ago. So you have to excuse me if I go under the
No,
radar.
you're fine.
Um,
I have a CRS. You know what that is, right?
I don't know.
Can't remember shit.
And you don't,
Well,
I was
well
just going to
done.
say, man, you don't take him seriously, please.
That's great. So before I forget,
That's awesome.
so that is awesome. So we had we had to finish recording the song. That was the next step, of course, because we couldn't use the boombox version for a movie. So we finished the song, went into the studio, recorded with the same guys, I think. And by the way, when going back to why Frank didn't want to do that in the first place was because he spent all his money on the first 5 songs with the studio
Mm.
engineer and everything. Not all his money, but
Yeah, yeah,
have any excess money laying around to do another recording. And I appreciate
absolutely.
it. So we finished the song, finished recording the song, and one of my favorite moments of my career. My mother and father flew out from Pennsylvania, as they did 1 or 2 times a year, and it was great to see, of course, family and friends from back east. And it just so happened that we were granted permission, Frank and I, to go down on the set of Staying Alive. He says, I want you guys to see and hear what's going on. Okay, and I was very excited about that. And I said, Frank, can I bring my mom and dad? He says, absolutely. I said, you think your brother would be okay with that? Absolutely. So the 4 of us, I think it was just the 4 of us, went down to the set. And when we walked in, it was like we were the heroes because
Oh my God.
Sly came over, John Travolta came over, the choreographer came over, some of the dancers, and they kind of circled around us and said, "What a great song!" And
Oh,
then they
that's
started
awesome.
playing it over the speakers in
Oh,
the room
wow.
that they were going to choreograph to it that day. And I was just blown away. That was
Yeah.
surreal for me. I'm trying to get my hat straight here. Sorry. I was blown away that this much attention was being given to this song.
Right.
And after a little bit, I introduced Sly to my mom and dad, and Sly even offered to take a picture with him doing this and my dad doing it.
Yeah,
And I have that picture. I don't. It's not
Oh,
accessible.
that's awesome.
that's amazing.
That was one of the best days of my career.
Oh my God, that is so great.
Sorry
That
for
is
the
Amazing
story.
story.
that
So
is amazing.
I think it's safe to say that Far From Over is more of your baby than the Rocky Four soundtrack.
Uh, I wouldn't say that. Rocky Four. If I had to place emphasis on anything, like if somebody said to me, "What's your favorite work that you've done?" It would be Rocky Four.
Nice.
Far From Over. I don't think still to this day that the song's finished. But
Really?
yeah, I didn't think it at the time either. I was like, Frank, he said, no, you need a verse, a chorus, a bridge, an instrumental section, an intro and an ending, 3.5 minutes long. He said,
Yeah.
it's fine. I wasn't confident about it until all this attention started
I think it's fantastic.
getting.
Well, it was on the radio nonstop
Well, here's the thing,
back when.
the record company wanted to release the Bee Gees material first, which is absolutely understandable based on
Sure.
the success of Saturday Night Fever. Well, I think they put 1 or 2 songs out of the Bee Gees, and they didn't do too well. Then they released Far From Over, and that not only did well on the radio, but Robin said it's driving ticket sales to the movie.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And I said, wow, that's just awesome. So that song has been very good to us.
Yeah.
That soundtrack allowed my wife and I to get a house out here on our own in California. And it just started my career off in a big way. And keep in mind, I was only out in LA at that time for maybe a year, a little over a year, and this all fell into my lap. by meeting
Wow.
Frank at that club that night.
Wow.
People don't usually experience that are trying to get into the
Mm-mm.
business. They,
No.
it could be a decade before they make the first meaningful connection.
Sure.
Sure.
Luckily, I met Frank Stallone, and we hit it off, and our relationship grew. We wrote some songs and got them in a movie that his brother was writing and directing, and that was
That's
that. That was
Do
my
you?
first foray into film music in LA.
I have an off the wall question for you, a little
Hmm.
bit. Um, do you get to go back home to Pennsylvania often?
I do.
Okay. So when you go home to PA, I'm not exactly sure. Exactly. Is it Lancaster?
Lancaster. It's called Lancaster.
Lancaster. We were saying
I
that.
told you that.
Some people say Lancaster
said
because
direct-
of
You
the
said Lancaster. You said Lancaster.
I said
Lancaster.
before the show, I said, "Oh, he's
Yeah.
from Lancaster." I go, "But if you're from Lancaster, you say Lancaster." That's funny. my best friend lives in Broomall, so
Oh, that's not far from where I lived.
no. Actually, he moved to Lancaster when he
Oh, did
first
he?
moved to Pennsylvania, and he went to Westchester University.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
What a
so
small
that's how
world.
I know the accent.
Ah,
Yeah.
I was
So
wondering about that. So my question is when you go home, have you had? I'm sure I'm going to assume I probably shouldn't, but that you have gone to the statue, the steps, and all that. Yes.
I've seen them only a couple years ago. I had never been to Philadelphia to see all that stuff that had come up about Rocky
Seriously. Okay.
or
Well,
Stallone. No, I hadn't
on the
seen.
first on your first visit there, what was the feeling that you got knowing that you are such a integral part of that movie? I mean, it had to be almost surreal, if not
It was
overwhelming.
surreal. And it was phenomenal. My new manager, Peter Hackman, came with me. You talked to Peter, I believe. He
Yeah.
accompanied me on this trip, as did my former manager, Robin. So it
Okay.
was the three of us, and it was such a great uh, experience for us. And yeah, seeing that, I'm cross. I'm getting my signals crossed here. That was for the Rocky IV director's cut when the three of us got together. Peter accompanied me to Philadelphia to see
Okay.
all that stuff, the steps and everything, and and we've got pictures taken of the
But
statue.
just to know that, so you show up to the steps. Now we call them the Rocky Steps. We don't call them the Philadelphia Museum of Art. We're,
Yeah,
we're biased.
yeah.
But just to know that you're such a integral part of that, and just, I mean, I can only imagine I'd be sitting there being like feeling larger than life.
I
It's,
was. It was. It was a dream come true. I mean, it was a moment of pride for me
I bet.
that was beyond any other moment up to that point. Yeah,
Man, that's crazy.
That's so
it's
awesome.
crazy.
So awesome.
It,
So Vince,
yeah.
tell me a little something about this here. I saw this when I was looking for some photos. We saw this symphonic rock suite, Rocky IV. Is this a tour you did, or is this a one-time show?
It was a one-time show in Tenerife, um, in the Canary Islands.
Oh, wow.
And
Oh wow.
the way that came about was a guy reached out to me, or maybe to Peter, through Facebook and said, I want to get to Vince Dicola, and I have an idea, blah, blah, blah. I don't know exact words, but it ended up being this guy named Pedro Merida. And Pedro he was a third of the production staff for a film music festival in Tenerife called Famusite. And Pedro said, listen, my favorite thing of all, my favorite music score of all is Rocky IV. And he said, it's an honor to talk to you,
Man.
and blah, blah, blah. He said, would you consider coming over here and putting together a Rocky medley, we don't have to do the whole score, just a medley of whatever you want to do. And you'll be there with an orchestra. And I said, man, I'd never done that before. He said, listen, we don't have the big budget, but we are going to also ask you to do master classes on the days that you're not rehearsing. And he said, you'll get paid for that.
Oh, wow.
You'll get paid very well. Anyways, long story short, we put this medley together, and um, it was, I think it was 12, 13 or 14 minutes long, and to go over there and perform that with an orchestra in front of a pretty big crowd, like 1,500 people, in an amazing auditorium. Just the out the outdoors of this place looked unbelievable.
Mm.
So yeah, that's how that came about, and
Wow.
it was a couple years later when Pedro said, "Let's do the same thing for Transformers." I said, "Well, really?" He said, "Yeah, let's do that." So we used the same people, and but this time, and this is a big differentiation. The first time I had done the Rocky medley over there was with their youth orchestra, and these kids were amazing. Well, this is going to be with the adult orchestra,
Oh,
and he said, Vince, he's going to be 64-piece orchestra and something like a 24-piece choir.
oh,
Wow! So
That's great.
he already had ideas, musical ideas of how to the order to put the songs in and how to connect them. I mean, I said, Pedro, you've done my job for me here. You
yeah.
really. He said, well, I'm very passionate about this, and he said, of course, you can do whatever you want, but this is my suggestion as a starting point. I think I used 80% of his ideas,
That's awesome.
and we put the thing together, and we luckily had the opportunity to record it, both audio and video,
Okay.
Oh,
and with I got 12 cameras set up. I mean, it was a pro setup. We are right now trying to get. Peter is working hard to try to get the rights to release that recording. Now, that was part of. It wasn't just for me. It wasn't just a Fumusite festival for Vince Dicola. There were other composers involved. Brad Fidel or
Fidel.
Fido. I don't know how he
Okay.
pronounces it. Terminator. See, I'm telling you, it's that bad. So he was set up to be the feature, and I was second to last. And it was an hour and a half concert. I think there was a break in there somewhere. And but man, it was unbelievable. When I was rehearsing with the orchestra and the choir, I was almost in tears. It sounded perfect.
Wow.
And we had this was the first opportunity to do the tag of Hearts on Fire, which was then called Up the Mountain, where he's going up the mountain and he gets at the top and
Yeah.
Drago. And this was the first time I had a chance to perform that piece live, let alone with an orchestra and a choir.
God.
So we put Training Montage and War and Hearts on Fire into this medley. And I think we ended with the going up the mountain scene, up the mountain.
Oh, wow.
And it was awesome. And I have to say, the standing ovation I got was about 2 minutes long.
I was going to say it had to have ended in a standing ovation, number one.
Yeah, it was another one of the great moments of my career.
So you're trying to get the rights to get this released?
Yes.
That maybe eventually we could get a CD or
I hope
something?
so. Of the whole concert. That's
Okay.
what Peter has a record company, and his record company, he wants that record company to release this
Okay.
this.
Is there any I don't what would you call it, Tony? Not footage, but audio of just
I
your
mean,
your
there might be something on YouTube. I don't know. Maybe some bootleg something.
There's bootleg stuff there. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you'll have to keep us
Yeah,
posted on that.
Absolutely.
yeah, that looked like
It'll be with the same conductor, and it'll have Transformers artwork to it, and
wow.
I'm really proud of it.
There would be no Rocky collection complete without it.
Yeah,
There you go.
yeah,
Amazing.
absolutely.
Amazing.
Well, I know we're a little late for this picture here, but we just wanted to put this up.
Oh my, there it is. Peter
Yeah.
said, that's it. I don't know where Peter is. Oh, he was taking the picture.
He probably took the picture. Yeah, yeah.
We had a
Well,
great
that's what I'm
time.
saying. You're standing there at the Rocky stops. You've got the statue below, and you're this huge part. It's like without we've said this. Tony and I have said this before. It's like when you watch a monster movie, you turn the volume off. It's not as scary. It's always the music that makes it so much more intense.
Absolutely. People don't realize that, but
It
Mhm.
is. It
true.
absolutely is.
Yeah.
And if the training montage, yes, would be so cool, with all the action and the fighting and whatnot going on. But it's the music that gets your heart beating and gets your blood pulsing.
Yep.
Like you said earlier too, Rick, when you're in the gym and Hearts on Fire comes on and you physically and mentally get pumped up about it, no
Yes.
movie. You're not watching a movie. You're
No.
hearing this, and this is getting
No,
you
that's
going.
right.
So
You
it's
might have the
passion.
movie in your mind, but
I
Yeah,
do.
the
Yeah, it's
music.
playing, but
but
it's
you can hear the passion. It gets you move. I mean, it's an inspirational song. It really is just
yeah.
beautiful. Love it.
The music
Oh,
is like the backbone. I'm going to say the music is the backbone
yeah,
of the movie.
Thank you for saying that.
yeah.
Absolutely, I
Well, like
100%
I said,
believe it.
and Rick, what about like the Drago entrance? When
Oh
Dolph was
yeah,
telling us,
Oh,
you got. I
that was
mean,
done. I tell you, that was one of the cues that was done to picture when it was finished. And it was one of the greatest days of recording. I have a very good friend named Casey Young, and Casey Young at the time had a truck full of synthesizers and all the latest equipment. And he brought all this stuff over to Scotty Brothers studio, and it was like a candy store for me. And there was keyboards everywhere. He said, "How about this, Vince? Let me just get some sounds up on all, a lot of these keyboards, and you go around the room and just try out different ideas." And my co-producer Ed Fruget was also in the room, and he is a keyboard player. So I said, "Ed, come on in." I think Casey might have played a role in this as well. And that cue was written very quickly, and again, it was inspired by the synthesizers, the sounds that I was getting, which I never had. I mean, this is, you have to understand, literally truck full of stuff and the latest gear at the time.
yeah.
And Casey knew how to run it. It was just amazing.
And that just it like resonates with you. You see the shadow.
I mean, how cool is that?
That's
And not only
Casey.
that, but it
Casey
played
got the sound up.
it played so well to the character. Like when I heard the music, I was getting aggravated. Like, look at his smug face, and like,
Yeah.
oh
Yes.
man,
Yeah, that was great. That was a great experience, a fun experience.
And
awesome.
you've had the privilege of actually, you've played with other musicians from Chicago, Jethro Tull. Um, well, I know you said Emerson, Lake and Palmer is one of your
Yeah,
uh, uh,
he's one. There are
inspirations.
influences. I never played.
Influences. No, but it
Yeah,
was one of your influences. But I mean, in Santana.
Alex Ligerwood.
Okay.
Is that the connection that you're reading, or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
not many people make that connection when they're talking to me. Alex is one of the best singers in the world. I'm telling you, I did so many club dates with him as a keyboard player
Okay.
out here in LA. That guy, every night he would change the melody, and that's very hard to do if you have great melodies. But he would embellish it perfectly. He wouldn't overdo it. Yeah, sorry, I could go off on.
No, but no,
No,
you know
no,
what?
go ahead.
There's a lot to be said for that because there there are singers and then there's singers, right? And
Yeah,
there's like someone like Alex or Steve Perry
yeah,
who doesn't meet they don't miss a note,
no, of
you
course.
know. They don't miss a beat, they don't miss a note, and they can go up and they can whatever they want to do, And then there's others who need all that other stuff to make them better, you know.
That's right, absolutely. Maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I was contacted by a representative for a guy named Glenn Hughes, who was in Deep Purple,
Okay.
lead singer and bass player for Deep Purple. And he was looking for a keyboard player to come in and record some B3 stuff, organ stuff. And he got my name from somebody, and I went in, and from the instant we met each other, we just clicked. And he loved the way I played. Fast forward, he knew I didn't really, I wasn't a touring musician. He knew that. He said, "Listen, I'm doing a 2-week tour in the UK. Would you consider coming over and playing with me?" I said, "Man, I'd love to do that. It's 2 weeks. It's not going to be an extended thing. You know, I'm not
Right,
going to
right.
be away from family for long. That's great." Uh, Glenn and Alex, it just so happens, they are the two of the best singers in the business.
Mm.
I had the honor of working with, and Jason Sheff from Chicago. You know, these guys are the best, the best. So yeah, I did the tour with Glenn, and the last date of the tour, he introduced me to the orchestra, to the audience, and got a very good response from them. But it was fun. I wasn't doing any of my material. It was all Glenn's stuff. It
Oh,
was a
Deep Purple, yeah.
so it was a tribute to Deep Purple. So we did all Deep Purple music,
That's
and
awesome.
that was fun.
Who
Very
played
cool.
Jimmy's part?
What's that?
Who played Jimmy's part?
I'm not sure I'm understanding you.
Jimi Hendrix? Wasn't he? He was the original Deep Purple, wasn't he?
No, he wasn't in Deep Purple. He wasn't associated with them.
Who was he? My mistake.
No.
It was. I'm going to blank on another name.
That's okay.
Richard Blackmore was a guitar player for Deep Purple.
Oh, Richie Blackmore. Okay.
But what I think you're getting at is the keyboard player. It was fun for me to learn his material. John Lord, one of the best rock and roll B3 players in the business.
Okay.
He's since passed away. So I had to learn all of John's stuff. And I remember one of the songs, he said, "Listen, you're going to have to do this note for note, because that's the people know this song and they know that
Right.
solo." I can't remember what song. I think it was Highway Star or whatever it was.
Mm.
And Glenn said, "You're going to have to learn that solo. You know, this is not improvising. He says, there's not going to be a lot of moments in the program like this, but I need you to learn the solo." So I went, learned a song note for note, and then I decided to go off a little bit on my own. And so remember the day that I played that song with him, he came over to my keyboards and he had a big smile on his face. He says, "I can't believe what you just did." He said, "You did on John's work. You had enough of John's work in there, but you brought your thing into it. It's phenomenal. So you do it whatever. You do it whatever way you want."
That's great.
Cool.
That's so cool.
Very cool. Well, Vince, we couldn't thank you enough for coming on, man. We really appreciated cutting out a few minutes of your day. Come on the show. The stories were fantastic.
I have many more if you want to ever have me on again.
Yes, we'd love to have you on again.
But yeah, we're looking forward to hopefully seeing that video one day of the concert with the orchestra. But no, it was such a pleasure chatting with you, and couldn't be happier, man. Rick, you got anything you want us to add to that?
No, just thank you so much for just making time for us. We truly, deeply appreciate it. And, down the road, we'd love to have you back on again and hear some more. The stories never get old,
There's more of them. I want to thank both of you guys for having me on. I appreciate it so much.
Absolutely. And then we want to catch up with you and see what you have coming next, if anything at all.
Yep. That's for the next time.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Guys.
Vince, thanks again so much. Tell Peter thank you as well.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Take
care. Oh, what a nice man.
Yes.
Tony, nice man.
We just, everybody we talk to, they're just so cool. They're so nice, and Vince, it's just amazing people. Gotta love it,
I would love to have him on again, hear some more stories. Those stories were awesome.
Yes.
We'll have to change our intro, though. That was very rude of us.
Yeah.
Not have the training montage or war or something. Come on.
Yeah, we deeply apologize for that one, Ben.
Well, like I said, we recorded the intro a year ago. I mean, and in fairness, we used the song because of the name of the podcast, Round 14. Yeah. And Going the Distance is taking place during Round 14. But we should have special intros for certain situations.
Well, I think we're just going to have to fire our technical advisor.
So funny.
Tony, you're fired.
I know, right?
Yep, you're fired.
Well, everybody, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you watching. I hope